Happy Hump Day, everybody, and welcome back to Brown Bag Bets. Powered by BETSPERTS, we are your daily dose of quick hit handicapping and sports betting picks. Joining me, as always, Mr. Andy Molitor, but more importantly, back for the first time in a while, it's finally time for Money in the freaking Brank. How are you, Frank? How are things? How did baseball season wrap up? I guess we'll touch on that for half a second.
Baseball
Meh.
sucks.
Oh, you didn't go like 8-2 in the playoffs? Like
You didn't tail all of Andy's picks?
I was gonna bet the playoffs, and then I was like, I hate baseball, and then I was like, I'm not even gonna watch playoff games. So I watched the play-in games, and I was like, I'm good. I had enough of this for the year.
We're gonna have to clip you saying I hate baseball. I think that's a good one.
I don't, but I do. Yeah, one of those things.
I mean, after like 2,500 games, looking at starting pitching for like 2,500 games, it's enough. Like, I get where you're at, and we talk about this like playoff series. It's not like you're gonna have big fluctuations in the price. It's like, like it's the pitchers that we've seen pitch 30 times all this year, plus the two teams that played each other yesterday, so it'd be the same total.
Plus, these idiots like to just pull pitchers in the third inning, and then just makes me sad. And I'm just like, all right, as if there's not enough randomness in that stupid sport.
I guess I enjoyed, and we will get to some Mitch Keller yet. Don't worry about that. But I enjoyed
pitching today. So
producer Dan is a very fatalist Braves fan, so like he was just convinced they were going to lose every series. So it was fun to watch him sweat that. And honestly, I just bet the Braves a bunch. I bet some Braves overs. What was my one prop? Like the one day I had to come up with a baseball bet. I really needed to fill a segment. I ended up doing like a hits plus RBIs matchup between Austin Riley and somebody on the Houston Astros.
Correa, maybe.
And maybe Altuve. I think I was cheering against him one day. But either way, my baseball was completely random, and that's why it won. Yeah, it was Altuve. That when you just take a sample size of 10, sometimes you win, and that's kind of how I got hot in World Cup too, or whatever it was. Euros. What do we do over the summer? Either way, Frank's here. Frank, what are you betting these days? Just basketball? So.
College football has been really good to me this year. Pretty much, I mean, it's pretty easy to be honest. College sports are easy in general. There's just not a lot of liquidity there. NBA's been good. I mean, anyone that's kind of jumped on this underwave, probably pretty profitable so far this year.
Yeah, the unders I think are still like hovering right around 60%. I think it got as high as 64% to start the year. But if you look at it over like I think the last like 5 or 6 days, the average closing totals are finally getting close to the average actual totals. So things have leveled out a bit. And I was actually curious. I mean, do you look at kind of the NBA closing lines in the markets, and what did you think of today's totals? I think today looked especially low.
Yeah, I've definitely been on more overs than unders probably the last 3-4 days, I would say. And this tends to happen, right? They start to go in a little bit of the wrong direction. But I think this is sort of a team specific thing. I mean, we've seen the effects on James Harden in a number of teams with the fouls issue. Some teams just don't, it doesn't matter, right? Like it hasn't affected them as much. Now, I think it matters a little bit to everyone, but hasn't affected them that much. So when we see certain teams kind of move down like this 6-point difference that we've seen so far in the NBA, maybe some teams not really that affected as some of the other teams have been in that regard. So I do think that there's certain teams. I've been riding sort of 76ers unders with limited success along the way. But I do think now there's probably some opportunities to come back on some overs. And the other thing too is, not to come back to baseball because I hate baseball, as we said, teams start to figure it out, right? When the spin rates went away, they came back, over a month's time. So teams will start to figure out how to get back to the free throw line or just make more shots because they're not attempting to get to the free throw line as much. So, water will find its level, I think. But I agree with you. I think there were certain numbers today that were particularly low for some of the teams.
Now, that may be a little misgiving, knowing what kind of picks we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But yeah, I think it was a combination. You had the foul changes, you had crowds coming back in, and just as things started to normalize for that, we had a really rough early wave of injuries. And like you said, water finds its level, and I think we've seen a lot of that here. So hopefully things have stabilized and we'll start getting some points back here. But did you have something, Andy? I saw you perk it up there.
Yeah, you guys went with water finds its level instead of life finds a way, like the Jurassic Park GIF. I would have gone with that one. It's classic chaos theory.
I'm not that into living recently.
Water does find its level.
Been doing more Bruce Lee stuff lately. Sorry.
Be water, guys. All right, Frank. Well, give me something to bet on football, just because I can see it queued up here, and I had that up first, and then we just jumped right to the NBA, my favorite league.
Yeah, my bet today, as I've sort of talked through this a little bit more, is Clemson under against Wake Forest here. Clemson, hilariously, a 4.5 point favorite in this game. And rightfully so. Clemson or Wake Forest looking at the number 10 college football rankings committee spot here is just hilarious, and being, marginally worse than Clemson, who has had a pretty bad year. I think the number's about right. I made the game like 5. But at 56, we haven't seen a Clemson total eclipse 54 this year. I don't really see this one happening. We've seen one quarterback, shout out Pitt, Kenny Pickett, being the guy who has sort of taken the top off the Clemson defense. He's the only one. Sam Hartman has been very good. He takes a ton of shots. He gains a ton of yards, but he's not going to be able to do that. He just doesn't have the talent level to sort of exploit this Clemson defense, just like nobody else has. And we haven't seen a total get this high. Clemson, since the Pitt loss, which was really terrible. I mean, they realistically should have been up 2 scores in that game. They had a shuffle pass pick 6. Never seen that before. Shuffle pass pick 6 in that game, and they ended up losing by 10. And they dropped multiple touchdowns. They had 2 touchdown passes or plays that would have been down towards the goal line with nobody around the guy that were dropped. Since then, they've been very conservative on offense. They're kind of letting DJ dink and dunk and just not making the game too difficult for him, which is something they should have done from the beginning because they haven't been successful on offense all year. But they sort of figured it out. They've sort of subscribed to this like Texas A&M, Oklahoma State style of football where let's win 20-17, right? Like let's just gunk this game up. Our defense is good enough to get stops at the end of the game. And like I said, I just don't see how Sam Hartman takes the top off this Clemson defense when we've seen one quarterback do that. And even though I said that, they only gained 5 yards per play in that game, which, in a college game to have a lot of success, you typically will see, upwards of 8 or 9 yards per play. And Pitt just had the ball the whole time. So I don't even know that they were incredibly successful against Clemson. They just ran a ton more plays than they did.
Yeah, I kind of just don't. I'm just gonna bet it. You didn't have to talk me into it. I appreciate the analysis. I'm just stuck on the 10 spot. I forgot. I mentioned this to Dan last night. I regaled you with my tales of Buffalo Wild Wings off the air. The fact that I was at a Buffalo Wild Wings last night, giving just free sponsorship to them, I guess. I was forced to watch the college football playoff announcement countdown show. I didn't realize like they take a full half hour to do that. I was complaining about that to Dan, and I kind of had thought about that a little. I'm like, oh, Wake Forest, like good for them. But now that you mention it, like that's kind of fucked that they're 10. Like they're not that good. They're not the 10th best team in the country. Right. And you know the arguments the Twitter sphere has about, Cincinnati this and Alabama that and all this, like really when it comes down to it, the fact that the 10th best team in the country, according to this, is an underdog to a team that is clearly not ranked at all in this, kind of makes me think you should just take like, whoever's setting the power rank, you'd have to throw out like DraftKings and whatever, or maybe go to whoever their line provider is in Europe, get their power rankings, but like pick like 6 Vegas bookmakers and some line providers from whoever's giving some of the legal books their numbers, mash all the power numbers together for betting, and that's your college football playoff. Like that's the most fair way. That's the market. Like you should trust the market over everything.
I mean, we have to have resume that matters. We talked about this morning with Austin. We did our college football show that we do on Wednesdays, and I like talked myself in halfway through that show. They're like, we need to reduce resume and increase like actual talent. I think they sort of do eventually sort of run together, but a team like Clemson not even being ranked, despite being, they're 7-3, and probably going to be 8-3 after this game. And I'm looking at teams like Baylor at 11th at 8-2 with a worse schedule, and BYU 8-2 at 14. And I'm looking at this Clemson team that lost on a pick 6 to Georgia. They lost in overtime to NC State on the road and just like sort of a weird game. And NC State's kind of decent. And then they lost a Pitt in a game they should have been up. Like they could easily have one loss this year, right? They could have beaten Georgia the first game of the season. And the first games of this season were kind of wonky for everybody. But I'm not saying that they're some great team, but they're a top 15, top 18 team in the country. And we're getting Wake Forest as a decent sized dog, granted on the road, but still a decent sized dog. Which would suggest that they're at least 2.5 points worse than Clemson on a neutral field, and they're 10th at 9-1, and they've played nobody. They were dogs to UNC. Like I don't really understand why we're not sort of. If only there was a computer system, maybe we could call it like the BCS or something that could figure this thing out.
Don't do that. Don't do
Yeah.
that.
It sounds like my
Yeah, like-
argument when I try to talk people into going back to cable because I'm sick of all these different apps to watch TV. But it does feel like, I mean, at the end of the day, the point it's to drive conversation. That's what people are talking about. And unfortunately, when you have everybody talking about stuff, you get a lot of kind of big arguments that avoid context and stuff. But it seems like they've done a pretty good job. I asked somebody this a week or so ago, some college football people. Can you think of any team that made the Final Four that shouldn't have? Or if we had a national champion since they made this change that shouldn't have been the national champion kind of stuff?
Michigan State that one year. Remember the Michigan State team? And it sucks. Like they were a really good team. It just sometimes the top two teams or the top one team is just so much better. And it makes it hard because you get these embarrassing semifinals, and then it's like, that team just was maybe the fourth best team. That sucks.
Yeah, and I'm even looking at a team like Notre Dame, who's 9-1, and yeah, their one loss was to Cincinnati when Jack Cohn was hurt and the backup was hurt, so they were on their third string quarterback, and they all like sort of played in the game. It was a very strange game, and Cincinnati won that game, and now they're getting a ton of credit for beating. I think Cincinnati's good. I'm not necessarily a Cincinnati doubter as much as a lot of people are, but I think Notre Dame's a better team, and like they have one of the toughest schedules in the country. That people always dog them for their schedule, so I think there's perception out there that Notre Dame has some terrible schedule. Their schedule is actually kind of decent, especially when you consider Cincinnati. And the Cincinnati loss came when they were down two quarterbacks. I'm looking at a team like that, and compared to like here's a good example, like Oklahoma State is 9-1. Oklahoma State with Spencer Sanders quarterback, he has to be the worst quarterback I've seen on a top 10 team, like ever. Like he's absolutely horrendous. And they're 9th, and they have a good defense, but like no one would make Oklahoma State any like better than any of the teams surrounding them, right? Because they have no quarterback. And I think there needs to be more input from an analytical side instead of like Archie Manning and Condoleezza Rice just like deciding for us who's going to make the playoff. Now, have there been teams that like the one year I could have made a case for that TCU team, and when Ohio State got in, but then Ohio State won the playoff. So I don't want to draw bias from two games, but they did end up winning. But this whole thing, and I think it comes back to the Buffalo Wild Wings or Wild Wings situation, where it's a show for money, right? It's just like
it's on prime time on a Tuesday. Yeah,
I think Ohio State's the third best team in the country, but if they lose one of these games, they're not going to make it. And a team like Michigan State, if they win this week, now they're 20-point dogs to Ohio State, but if they win this week by some sheer chance of luck, they're going to get in, and they're like the 25th best team in the country. Like they're 20-point dogs. Like there's no way.
I was just pulling up. I have access to a Google sheet where someone who keeps incredibly sharp college football power rankings has his updated numbers or hers. I don't know. This could be anyone. I won't say, but and they have Cincinnati and Notre Dame essentially a pick 'em. They have Wake Forest as the 25th best team down the. I mean, a lot of this stuff does make sense logically if you look at it from the betting market. But yeah, like I think Frank in a roundabout way got to the right answer. It's about the money, and that's why I'm excited. I said this to Dan off the air. I'm excited for two-loss Bama to get in over like an undefeated Cincinnati just to watch Twitter like burn. And there's like 10 situations. I think almost any situation at this point, Twitter will just freak out either way. And it's fun that we're freaking out over rankings in November because again, these don't matter. These are just like, they switch, everyone's like, they're saying this because if this happened, like kind of, but they can just change their mind. It doesn't matter. There's no like algorithm to this. It's essentially opinions at this point. So
and they always try to set it up for like the upcoming games. Like when they had Oklahoma down in 8th, now Oklahoma lost last week, but when they had them down in 8th, they had 3 tough games coming up. And if they had one out, they would have jumped all these teams, right? They would have been undefeated. They played a bad schedule up until that point. So I think people don't realize that they sort of set these things up. Like the way these are sitting right now, they're telling Oregon, win out and you're in because you beat Ohio State, even though they have the best win in the country, but also maybe the worst loss. But they're saying, well, if we're putting Ohio State in, we have to put Oregon in because they're they beat Ohio State head to head, right? And they each have one loss. So they set these things up so that, I think that if Alabama loses to Georgia close, I think they are going to get in. And this is where we need to use our sort of, like you're saying, our analytics and our power ratings and smarter people than you or I to like set this thing up, instead of like, just some random resume like analysis on, of these like handful of people that are making these rankings. I think we could put a lot of smart people in a room and make a computer system that picks these better.
Well, and really, like, I'm looking at it now. Again, I'm looking at these same power rankings. Thing is, you want competitive semifinals. At this point, like there's a 15-point gap between the first and fifth teams. So even, and just this is one set of power rankings that said that the fourth team ranked in this would be a 11-point dog to Georgia right now. So I mean, it's still an over one score. It's not like you're going to get a bunch of pick'ems if you have the top four teams. You still have really good teams, and we did stretch this out a little because it says Frank's NBA on there. Frank just gave us a stale NBA number and then backed out. He's like, "Oh shit, never mind. This moved like 4 points." So if you think you're getting a pick from Frank for the NBA, you are dead wrong.
Yeah, this stupid Pistons game, man. I played to 11.5. Played this under, as we were just talking about how the overs have some value. I played that under. Now it's like something ridiculously low. I what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I've got a derivative there. I went, and we'll talk about that in a second. I went with a team total under instead, but I think you're right there. As much as it does look like it's time for overs to pop, I wonder if we just kind of settled at what total should actually look like versus them finally looking to be a little too low. It just, I wonder if we've actually hit the floor, or we're just kind of steadying out before the next drop after a round of injuries or something.
Yeah, which team total are you playing?
Pistons.
Yeah, under, I suppose.
Yeah, it was. I think I got like 102, 103, 104. I don't really know.
That's
I mean,
what
Pistons. I think it was under 102.5 is what I ended up grabbing. But I mean, they've barely scored 100 points in most of their games this year. So even if it's moved a little bit, I still don't mind that.
In the last few nights, the last couple games, they shot like 55% or something. It's like, that's not gonna continue to happen for the worst team in the NBA. So
no,
whatever.
So, all right, Frank. Any final thoughts before we let you go? Finish your lunch. You got a golf pick or anything?
Oh, you know who I did? You know who I did take? You'll be proud.
Give me one golf bet.
Hudson Swafford, 140-1. I took him in Georgia. He hasn't played particularly great at this RSM Classic, but University of Georgia.
Did you see my DFS lineup I sent?
Yeah, it's perfect. Absolutely. Keith Mitchell, Harris English, Hudson Swafford.
Every single person on that DFS lineup claims permanent residence on Sea Island. Those are all locals. And now Harris English pulled out though, didn't he?
Did he? I
think he did. He ruined it. So
that's what Andy told me yesterday.
I'm adding Hudson Swafford to the official card.
You have to bet him. You have to bet him at this point.
I'll go find a big number on him. He just looks like Harris English. He's the same person. Keith Mitchell too. They're all the same guy.
Have we ever seen Harris English and Hudson Swafford in the same place? Because I haven't. You never really. Maybe we're getting Harris English.
I mean, Frank, they play at the same tournaments all the time.
So have you seen them though?
Are you sure?
No, they haven't been matched up. So
maybe Harris English just plays 2 rounds and he plays one really shitty one, and it's Hudson Swafford.
This is like a God. What's the Magic movie? The
Prestige.
The Prestige. This is a real Prestige situation right now. God damn it, Frank! You got me all off kilter. I got a meeting at noon. All right, Frank. That's at real Frank Brank on Twitter. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for the pick. You gave me 2. I didn't even know we were getting a golf one. Appreciate it. We'll have you on again. I miss talking to you. All right. Thanks, man.
See you guys. Thanks.
See you, Frank. Got you all off kilter. I'm not thinking about the Twins thing and tennis. Anyway, we got to get you to your golf meeting at 12. NBA, already mentioned the Pistons team total at 102.5. It just, again, that number I have, the Pistons scoring about 99 points tonight. 102.5 looks good. If it's 101.5, I honestly think that looks fine too. I had them at 99 and I honestly tweaked it up a little bit. They came in closer to 98. So 101.5 looks okay there. Another team total under here, the Rockets. Again, as I start to look at some of these games, it's hard for me to put a finger on kind of what the overall total is going to look like. The Rockets are playing the Thunder tonight. The Thunder have been playing very well. Hard to figure out if, what we've seen the last week or so from the Thunder is real, or are they just going to kind of go back to being what we expect them to be, one of the worst teams in the league that just kind of had a hot week. So instead of trying to figure out what the Thunder are going to do, I'm pretty sure the Rockets are going to struggle to score, even again, 101 points, let alone 104, 105 that will need to get over that total. So glad to grab that one, but I did finally get an over here, Andy. It's finally overtime. The Nets are playing tonight after that loss. Unfortunately, couldn't cover for us, and things got pretty ugly. Just a really poor shooting night for them. They visit the Cleveland Cavaliers in a spot that could, easily be a good place for them to get things back together here, put up kind of a big number. The Cavaliers on the other side, no Jarrett Allen, no Evan Mobley. I think the defense for the Cavaliers is going to be suspect at the very least here. So nice spot here for overs. Thought about maybe a Nets team total over, but like the over, was able to grab 206.5. It's starting to tick up a little bit. I would play this 207, maybe a little lesser stake at 208. There is a potential chance that Kevin Durant or James Harden sits out tonight. Again, they've played just a bunch of games. Kevin Durant's dealing with a little soreness. If Durant is out, I generally don't mind. He kind of slows the pace down a little bit, and I think we'll be fine. It's just such a low number. And although we went under a low number yesterday, we'll go over a low number today. And then a couple of first quarters, the Bulls first quarter here, and the Blazers, again, I have them short favorites here on the road. Chicago has been great in the first quarter this year. The Lakers first quarter plus 3.5. I know it's tough to back the Lakers here, but they've actually been good starters here despite how poor finishers they've been. And 3.5 points is just too many against a Milwaukee team that I think is still trying to get comfortable with all its starting pieces coming back. So a bundle of NBA picks there, Andy. What do you got for us golf-wise?
Yeah, and you focused on the negative yesterday. 76ers first quarter plus 3.5 was a cash. That was a winner. If you bet the 76ers, first half, if you bet the team totals, if you bet the first half team total, if you bet the 76ers any which way except for the first quarter, you were a loser. You found that diamond in the pile of Philadelphia poop yesterday because they were bad the rest of the game.
They start well. Doc gets them going, but at some point the legs are tired and the bench is short. They need their center. Get well, Joel Embiid.
I appreciate a good derivative. So, all right, a couple golf classic RSM classic head-to-head bets. Webb Simpson over, and I'm going to do dogs again. Even though this Luke List is a favorite, I'm laying it, but I'm getting a dog price, I guess, is what I mean to say. Webb Simpson over Scotty Scheffler. Yes, Scotty Scheffler has been hot. But I'm going a little more long-term form in this, and I still would have Webb Simpson as a mild favorite here. And I'm getting plus 109. If you shop around, there's some 105s, 107s. Best number I found was, I think, Chris. So plus 109 on that, just based on, I think this to be much more of a coin flip, kind of fading the hot hand there. And Luke List, my favorite guy to watch putt, because it's just... I guess I'm a masochist in that way. But Luke List minus 1.5 strokes over Adam Long. Adam Long stinks. And he has gotten his last 3 times out, 11th, 22nd, and 25th. Again, kind of a hot hand fade, I guess. He's not that good. He missed 17 cuts last calendar year. And I know we do a wraparound season and, technically we're in the 2022 season, but I look at it from a calendar standpoint. And in the year of our Lord 2021, he has missed 17 cuts. Adam Long has not played good golf this year. He's just had a couple nice outputs, I guess, in the last few weeks here. So Luke List over him, I have this quite a big difference. I'd lay 2.5 strokes if they let me. That's just not something you see that often. Tony Book used to have that once in a while, and they'd do some matchups with some real big favorite. It'd be like 3.5 strokes or something ridiculous. But just those two, taking it pretty easy on golf, and we'll close things up with some tennis.
Indeed, a bunch of tennis. Things are starting to slow down a little bit, but a bunch stuck out to me today. We actually have a pick in the WTA final. This is the final of the finals. Annette Kontaveit has just been tearing through the last month of the season here. She faces Garbina Muguruza today. Was able to get minus 2.5 at even odds. Really like that. -2 at normal juice is fine. You could play the money line if it's 150 or better there, but just seems like a really nice spot for her. She's played well this week. I think we're getting some value because she lost to Muguruza a few days ago. But if you look at the context, it's a match she really didn't have to win. You go back and watch. Played well, tried her best, but I really don't think was looking to bring her best tennis and really try to fight back. Muguruza taking advantage of, again, a match Kontaveit didn't have to win. So I think she'll be just fine here in the final. Love the way she's playing. Happy to lay 2.5 games with her. And then 3 dogs here in the clay tournament, Montevideo and down in Uruguay. Again, we're on clay here to finish up the season. But we'll start with Seppi. Sorry.
That's a name.
I know. Ormache. I'm trying to remember who I actually had first in the list. I had to pull it back up. I forget how I organized them. But Ormache there at +110. She plays Emiliana Arango. Just kind of a numbers play for me. I look at the way both of them have been playing. Arango, maybe a little bit better over the last couple of weeks, but like the way Ormachea played when we had her earlier in the week in her first match. I have her as a favorite here, so plus anything looks good to me here. Veronica Seppi-Roy, the older player, kind of an up and down year for her, probably more on her way out than anything else, but as +150 here, I have her closer, kind of +110, +115. It makes sense to me that the younger player Parry here would be a favorite, but we saw Roy beat her last week in 2 sets pretty comfortably, and I'm not seeing an adjustment here, oddly enough. So happy to take her again this week at a number. Again, looking at the past week, looking at my numbers, and then another big underdog, which again, kind of a numbers play here. I can't tell you too much really about Maria Lourdes-Carl, but know that she's playing Kasantseva, a young woman who is basically on a 2-week win streak here, and I think it's just kind of gotten above a little bit her value in terms of a market perspective. This one is a smaller play. I'm going to go just about half a unit here on Carl because, again, a little bit less familiar name for me, but a handful of underdogs and a favorite in the final.
And also, fun fact, the granddaughter of Eric Carl, the author of The Very Hungry Caterpillar. I made that up. I just remember his name. So, all right, let's call it a day. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll do some Thursday night football stuff.
That's right. We got to get you to your golf meeting.